Welcome back to the channel, guys. I am Dave, and we're here with another video, this time covering Airbnb as we examine the company and look to see whether it is a good investment and something that can make us money. As always, I do want this to be a two-way street. I'm hoping to learn from you and pick up new ideas and not just have it be a one-way conversation. So if you have any thoughts on Airbnb or any other companies that may be a great investment, please leave them down in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks. Now, when I'm beginning to research a new company, before I jump into the financials, market cap, various ratios like price to earnings, things like that, I like to take a step back and actually look at the bigger picture, the biggest picture possible, really, and ask some fundamental questions about the company. So these are the big picture questions that I want to make sure I can answer, and answer yes on every single one before I will consider putting my money into this company. Number one, do I believe in the management team? It's very important that the leadership of the company you're trusting your money with is competent, intelligent, and going to lead the company forward. Number two, how big is the total addressable market, and is it growing or shrinking? So you could have a great management team, but if you're in a shrinking industry, that's not something I want to be a part of. So for example, if we're looking at internal combustion engine vehicles, it could be a very well-run company with a great CEO, but that overall industry is shrinking as electric vehicles are growing. So that is definitely not something I would want to invest in. It has to be growing or at least stable at the very least. Number three, does the company have significant competitive advantages versus the competition? This is a big one. Why do I want to invest in them as opposed to someone else in the same industry? We need to be able to answer yes on that. Number four, this is more of an ESG thing. Is the company an ethical company? Are they a good global citizen? So this is kind of why I don't like to invest in oil and gas companies, tobacco companies, maybe drug companies that had a part in the whole opioid epidemic type thing. So, and are they just doing good in the world? Because at the end of the day, we want to make money, but we also want to see our money do good in the world and go towards good things while it's growing. That's one of the reasons I like Tesla. It's, doing more than anyone to push sustainable transportation and energy forward. So while it's done very well for me, it's also pushed the world forward in a good direction. And then number five, you always have to think about this one for any investment you're going to make. What are the biggest risks the company is facing, and how likely are they to occur? You can't just sort of stick your head in the sand and ignore any potential downsides because you like the idea of the company. You have to take a good hard look at what could go wrong and how likely is it to go wrong. So those are our five questions, and we'll start with number one. So the CEO of Airbnb is a man named Brian Chesky. He is the founder as well as the chief operating officer of the company, which is always a big plus in my eyes. Very smart guy. He's been running the company from the start. So he has the vision of where to take it and believed in it from the get-go. He's still young and likely to be around for a long time, which is a big plus that a lot of people don't think about when they think about their management team. Sometimes continuity is a good thing, and if you have a great CEO, you want to make sure that he's going to be around for the long haul and he's not about to retire in a couple of years, because in that case, who knows what might happen. I always love founder CEOs. As I said, I think they're really willing to go the extra mile for the companies. The company they start is often like their baby. They love it and they want to see it succeed. You get amazing dedication when you have a founder running the company. When I think of founder CEOs, I think of guys like Elon Musk, who was sleeping on the factory floor during the Tesla Model 3 ramp, making sure that trying to get them out of the trouble they were in. And you won't find any other major auto CEO doing that, that's for sure. You have Jeff Bezos. He grew Amazon from a small startup in his garage to one of the biggest companies in the world. I think they were briefly the biggest in the world, but now they're still top three for sure. And of course, Steve Jobs, he got forced out of Apple for a while and came back when they were in really dire straits and managed to save the company, turn it around, and turn it into the absolute juggernaut that it is today. In addition to that, in 2018, Brian was also named the Bay Area Executive of the Year by Business Times, and he was also recognized on Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People for 2015. I've also just listened to a bunch of his interviews and heard him speak. It's just something I always recommend you do if you're researching a company. And I like a lot of what he has to say. He seems very smart, very with it, and really lives and breathes the company, which is what I love to see. So I'd like to show you a few short clips of Brian just to give you an idea of what I like about him. And hey, what is that? You guys hear that? Hey guys, this is Editor Dave coming to you from the future at the video editor's desk, which happens to be the exact same as the filming desk. But I've abducted past Dave to bring you an important message from the future. And that is, at this very early stage in my channel, this is only my 4th video, every single subscriber is so important in being able to continue to make this content and participate in the YouTube community. So if you enjoyed the videos, please consider taking 1 second and hitting subscribe. It'll help me so much going forward and allow me to continue making content for you. Thanks, and sorry for the corny gag, but let's get back to the content. It comes through in the video, so let's check it out. Okay, so here is Brian talking about the founding and starting of his company, Airbnb.
And Joe lives in San Francisco at this point. This is like 2007. And he's trying to get me to come to San Francisco. He's like, Brian, come to San Francisco. We're going to start a company together. We're going to start a company together. And I'm like having this job in LA. And I remember at one point my life was like, I was in a car and the road in front of me looked exactly like the road behind me. And that kind of terrified me. And I wanted to take a detour. So I have this moment, I'm sure all of us have these moments in our life where we make a change and everything changes after that. I quit my job, and I have an old Honda Civic. I put everything I own in the back seat in the trunk of an old Honda Civic, including a rolled-up foam mattress. I have $1,000 at the bank, and I call up Joe, and I said, I'm coming to San Francisco. And it turns out that Joe said, well, the rent is $1,150. So I actually can't pay rent. It turns out that weekend, this international design conference is coming to San Francisco. We go to the conference website. All of the hotels on the conference website are sold out. And so we had this idea. We said, well, what if we just turned our house into a bed and breakfast for a design conference? Unfortunately, I didn't have any beds, but Joe had 3 airbeds. We pulled the airBeds out of the closet. We inflated the 3 airbeds. We called it the Airbed and Breakfast. Yeah. I love that noise. So that's how I started, airbedandbreakfast.com. So I guess the answer is no. When I started airbedandbreakfast.com, I didn't think I'd be at the New York Stock Exchange. We ended up hosting 3 people, a 35-year-old from Boston, a 30-year-old from India, a 45-year-old father of 5 from Utah. But what ended up happening was we ended up becoming friends, and we made enough money to pay our rent. At this point, we say, we're ordinary guys. I bet you there's a lot of other ordinary people like us that want to make some extra money, meet cool people. I asked Joe, I said, well, who's the best engineer you know? Joe said, well, my old roommate Nate is. And so the 3 of us got together, and we had a simple idea. What if you can book someone's home the way you could book a hotel anywhere in the world? And that's how it started.
I found that pretty fascinating. I had no idea that the name Airbnb came from because they sold air mattresses at their place to get started. I always thought it's something to do with air travel or kind of dropping into a new location or something like that, or they just thought air was a catchy name. But found that story very interesting and gave a lot of color to the company. Also, just the fact that he, decided to take the road less traveled and came out here to try and start a company with less than $1,000 to his name, I think is extremely inspiring. So in some senses, when you're investing in a company, you're kind of betting on the jockey. And it's starting to look like Brian is a guy I wouldn't mind putting my money on. Now, that being said, even though the CEO is probably the most important person, that there is a whole executive team running the company. So you want to make sure there's a whole team of good people. And I think that was kind of one of the pitfalls that Tesla ran into early on is Elon Musk didn't really have a good, strong number 2, and he was trying to do too much. He's trying to run everything himself. Not really a problem these days. I think their CFO is great, and they have a great team. But let's hear what Brian has to say about building a team to run his company.
And you learn all these things that made you successful. Like you can dive in, you can help people, you can solve problems. And one day, it feels like everything you do doesn't matter because the company's too big. And you have to start to run the company fairly differently. And so the last couple of years, it's been very, very clear that part of what I need to now be doing is building an incredibly strong management team and spending a lot more time building the team and building the platform for all future innovation. So we have this very successful single product, homes, and we thought to ourselves, well, we want to be a company that's going to be around for a long, long time. And so to be able to do that, I want to be able to have an executive team that's going to be with me for a dozen years or longer, the way Steve did or Jeff did at Amazon. And so that's kind of probably the biggest thing that I've been doing more recently.
So this is the kind of stuff I really like to hear. At a certain point, when going from a small startup to a larger company, he realized he couldn't just do everything himself anymore, and he's more effective by working on building a team to run the company well, as opposed to just trying to deal with every little issue himself. That's a good sign. So, do I believe in the management team, and do I think they're going to use my money wisely to help grow the company larger in the future and make me money in the future? And I think for this one, I am more than happy to give them a check. Okay, so number 2 is total addressable market. How big is it? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Is there room for this company to really grow, maybe a 5x, a 10x, even more? So I did a little bit of research on the market, and According to Airbnb, they say that the total addressable market for the company is $3.4 trillion, which is absolutely massive. Now, that is the global travel market as well as what they call the experience economy. So that would be, an experience could be anything, tour guides, trips, they could facilitate any sort of experience and take their cut of that. So 3.4 trillion, that is a massive market. Now, they wouldn't ever end up taking that whole pie because what they're doing is facilitating these transactions on their platform. So they're bringing the host together with the customer. The host will always receive the majority of the funds, but Airbnb as the platform will still take a decent chunk of that TAM, or total addressable market. Now, they could also attack new segments and try to grow more that way. They've talked about allowing flight bookings on their platform, so you could book an entire trip, your stay, your experiences all on one platform, which would be, I think, extremely convenient. Like, what if I want to go to Scotland, do a tour, and have my flights, my tour, my stays all booked through the same platform? That's way more convenient than how I usually do it these days. I'd also just like to note that I tend to like companies more when they don't sell a physical product. So, if you're building something to sell it, I always find that your margins tend to be a bit lower. You have materials costs, all these different things, whereas software margins can be quite high. If you think about things like the Apple App Store and they're just taking a cut, very similar to how Airbnb takes a cut on their platform, that is just an absolute cash cow for Apple, where they're charging these large fees. There's actually been some controversies about their fees being too large, but they're able to charge these fees. They don't have to make any physical products. They don't have to worry about shipping, and the margins therefore can be quite high. You also have, say, the Google App Store and any sort of a SaaS company, Azure. Now, here's another question. Is this market shrinking or growing? So over the last few years, the answer is definitely it's shrunk, unfortunately. The pandemic has seen to that. We've all been in lockdown. We haven't been able to go travel nearly as much as we like, which has hurt Airbnb in the short term. But we seem to be through the worst of it now. Here's hoping. And I don't see us going back to lockdowns anytime soon. In fact, I think we could be looking at a big boom in travel as people have been locked up for 2 years, really wanting to get away. I know personally I'm dying to go on vacation. I know a lot of my friends and family really want to as well. And we're all just really to get back to regular life and travel again. So I think these next few years could actually be very big for the travel industry, and it will continue to grow going forward. Let's watch another interview with Brian as he discusses how travel in the industry has changed throughout the pandemic and how it's going to continue to change going forward.
What I think has happened is, if you really think about it, before the pandemic, most people were tethered to where they worked. They had to live near where they worked. Now, for millions, or actually tens of millions of office workers, many of them are no longer tethered. Their CEOs are now offering flexible work policies. We just saw Amazon, Ford, Procter & Gamble, PwC all put out remote flexible work policies. And I think they're just a sign of things to come because companies are actually embracing this new model. If you don't have to go back to the office 5 days a week, if all you have to do is believe in a world of Zoom, to believe a world where people have more flexibility. A world where people have more flexibility is a world where we can travel more times to more locations. And when we do travel, we can stay longer. And I think this fundamentally is a revolution in how we travel.
Now, to me, this just makes so much sense. It's almost like, work from home in a sense gives you the opportunity to work from anywhere, right? As long as you have an internet connection, you can really go anywhere and continue to work. A lot of people out there, I think, would love to spend a few weeks, maybe even a month in another country and work during the days, explore the country during evenings and weekends, and not have to use up all their vacation days. There's no real reason why they can't do that with their laptops. And even when they're gone, you can post your place on Airbnb back home, and that will cover your expenses of living in a whole new country. So it could be a very cost-effective way for people, like I suppose especially young people, if you don't have a young family, to be able to travel the world and not have to worry about running out of vacation days and being able to cover your expenses of living expenses and things like that. Also, I know for me, I've actually done this in the past where I've had to go on a trip with friends or family, and we're going away for a long weekend, and I don't have the Friday or the Monday, whatever it may be, booked off. So what I ended up doing is bringing my laptop and working from there on the Friday, and then spending the rest of that long weekend with them, and everything worked fine. So a lot of new doors are opening in the way people travel, and I think Airbnb is poised to take advantage of it. So having said that, is the total addressable market large and is it growing? I think we can go ahead and give Airbnb another check for this. Next, does the company have significant competitive advantages versus the competition? So when we think about the competition for Airbnb, the companies that usually come to mind are, number one, traditional hotels. Large hotel chains, they've been around for years. Number two would be Vrbo, which is run by Expedia. And number three would be Booking.com. So for number one, these traditional hotel chains, they need to invest significantly before they can even have a single person stay at their facility. They have to build an entire location and train and hire staff, all these things that Airbnb doesn't have to worry about. All they have to do is let someone else take care of building the house, the building, whatever it may be, and just allow them to post it on their platform and take their commission. It's that simple. It's a great business model, I think, and should be very high margin. Now, for Vrbo and Booking, I think that Airbnb has very strong network effects that are working in their favor. For example, you get this flywheel where hosts will want to put their location on Airbnb because that's where the most customers are looking for a place to stay. And why are most customers there looking for the place to stay? Because that's where the most hosts are. So everyone just keeps joining Airbnb, and it is a feedback loop causing it to grow bigger and bigger. It's very hard to break. Reminds me a lot of, for example, Facebook. They got to this critical mass where everyone is on Facebook. That's why everyone else wants to be on Facebook, because that's where their friends are. So Google comes along a little later with their Google Plus. They really made a big push to try and become a strong number two to Facebook, and it completely fell flat. There's just not enough growth. Everyone was already too invested in the platform, and eventually Google ended up shutting down Google Plus. Another example would be Twitch, the game stream. Well, it's much bigger than that now, but they do streaming, owned by Amazon, and it's really the biggest platform for live content and game streaming, DJs, just talking, could be anything really. Gaming's the big one though. And then Microsoft saw this giant market and they tried to take a part of it, launching a product called Mixer. So they invested a ton of money in development, marketing, trying to bribe away content creators from Twitch to put their content onto Mixer. And in the end, they just couldn't overcome those strong network effects and the flywheel of no one would come to their platform because all the creators were still on Twitch, and all the creators were still on Twitch because that's where all the viewers were. So it was this catch-22 that once you have this network effect in your favor, it's extremely hard to overcome. I do have to give credit to Vrbo. They're running a very strong advertising campaign to try and grow their app. They may become a significant number two, but I don't see them overcoming Airbnb. Airbnb's brand has hit that point where it has become synonymous with the segment. So when you think about it, sometimes these companies, these products grow so big that instead of saying the segment or the type of product, you just think the brand, which is what I think when I'm thinking short-term stays. If I'm talking to a friend about travel, I don't say to them, oh, I'm going to book a short-term rental. What I say to them is, oh, I'm going to book an Airbnb. And they're likewise, like you don't think in your head, I'm going to book a short-term rental. You think I'm going to book an Airbnb. It's just the top of mind for that segment. And I really don't see how you can overcome it. It's really hard to get to that point. And once you do, you're just in the minds of everybody. And it's so hard to overcome. So for these reasons, I'm going to go ahead and give Airbnb a check for number 3, competitive advantages. Okay, so for number 4, is the company doing good in the world? Are they a good global citizen? Are they helping build a brighter future? I don't want my money going towards, causes that are causing harm or not helping people. So when I think about Airbnb, what they're really doing in a way is bringing more people together. You have these hosts starting their own small businesses, meeting their guests, people traveling, experiencing new cultures, building more understanding and connections between people, which I think is always a good thing. Now, they also are very philanthropic. During the Afghan refugee crisis, they were great about hosting refugees fleeing the conflict who had nowhere to go. So in February of 2022, the Airbnb.org Foundation reached its goal of facilitating stays for 20,000 Afghan refugees as guests at Airbnb locations. Also, with the Russia and Belarus crisis, they have acted quickly to suspend any business in Russia and Belarus as the unfortunate invasion of Ukraine is ongoing. And for those Ukrainians fleeing the conflict, they have committed to providing free temporary housing for up to 100,000 refugees fleeing Ukraine. The company will fund these stays with help from Airbnb hosts and donations to the Airbnb.org refugee fund, which is a great way for them to, help these refugees. There's no benefit to the company. It's just being a good global citizen and helping out in these times of crisis. Additionally to that, some kind-hearted people have actually used the platform as a way to send money to locals in the conflict zones. So what they've done is find Airbnbs listed in Ukraine and book stays there and pay for them, having no intention to actually go, just out of the goodness of their hearts, sending money to these hosts in Ukraine, which is it's a very interesting way for them to facilitate charity. So I do think this company is doing good in the world. I am convinced that if I invest my money in the company, I will be helping the world more than harming, and I am satisfied to give them a check for number 4. Number 5 is, what risks are the company facing and how likely are these risks to come about? Now, you want to make sure to put your biases aside here and think of any risks that the company could encounter and really just think about this unemotionally. Now, when I think about Airbnb, of course, the one that immediately comes to mind is, another variant from the pandemic causing us to go back into lockdowns. But, thinking about it more deeply, I really think this is pretty unlikely. We've been in this situation for probably about 2 years now, which, quite frankly, it's amazing they've done as well as they had. They IPO'd right when a pandemic started, and they're a travel company. It doesn't get any more tough than that. So kudos to them for coming through it. But I really don't see it happening again. I think people are kind of fed up with lockdowns. They're just done with it, and they want to move on with their lives. We've all had the vaccine available to us, and the newest variant, Omicron, has become less severe in the symptoms than the previous Delta and original variants. So if that trend continues, then symptoms should get less and less, and I think people will just be willing to deal with it if it arises. So I think I'm okay with investing in the company, knowing that this is a risk they could face. Now, of course, the competition could be a risk. Vrbo and Booking could come in and start taking the market away from them. Traditional hotels could get on the ball and start competing, but I don't see this being a big issue. In fact, the opposite has almost started to happen in that some small hotel chains have started to post on Airbnb and become a part of that platform, where Airbnb will take a cut of that. So they're really just growing bigger and bigger. I think with the network effect working in their favor, I don't see them dropping to number 2 in this space anytime soon. So although there is competition, I think I am okay with the risks that entails. Now, a third risk could be some regulations. There's been a lot of fights about Airbnbs in various cities. Some regulators are worried that with all these owners and property managers putting their properties on Airbnb as short-term rentals instead of long-term rentals, the supply of these long-term rentals has gone down, causing the residents to have to pay more in rent as demand goes up and supply goes down. That's a concern, but Airbnb has done a good job, from what I've seen, of working with these cities instead of working against them to find common ground and implement any regulations and rules that they think are fair. So I think that's really the way to go. You don't want to try and fight these local governments all around the world. You want to work with them and establish your niche in the city. Another potential risk or headwind that some people have discussed is the idea that this new metaverse that a lot of these tech companies are building toward will have a drag on the travel industry, that you'll want to have more experiences in virtual reality as opposed to actual reality. I guess that could be a minor concern, but I don't see it being a big risk. I think people are always going to want to explore and see the real world. Some things are just better in person. You want to go somewhere, feel the wind on your face, see how things actually are, have real experiences and real interactions with other people, other cultures, other places. So maybe a minor headwind that some people might travel a bit less if we see the metaverse come to fruition, but certainly that's not very close, and I think real travel will always have its place. The second Another one is rising costs of fuel. Now, this is a real concern. This is immediate, not something in the distant future. Right now, we're seeing massive increases to the cost of fuel, so that could impact people's ability to drive to faraway places, or might impact the cost of plane tickets as jet fuel prices rise. This is, of course, partly due to the conflict in Ukraine with Russia. My thoughts go out to the Ukrainian people, and I wish them nothing but the best. And I hope this conflict ends as soon as possible with as little loss of life as possible. In the meantime, though, we have sanctions on Russian oil and gas. We have increased demand and reduced supply of oil. That's driving prices up, and it's possible this could impact people's ability to travel as much. So that's a short-term issue. I don't see it lasting forever. I think eventually the supply and demand will sort itself out. With prices this high, people are going to want to get into that industry and sell it to you. Provide more supply, prices will come down. That's how the economy works. And frankly, I just don't think people will accept prices this high for the long term. Maybe in the next year or so. I mean, this conflict could drag out. There's been a lot of talk about increasing supplies at home, so we're not so reliant on other countries. But that's more of a long-term solution. So yeah, this one is a real concern to have. It could be a headwind on travel, but I don't think it's a massive threat. If anything, it's a minor hit to demand over the short term, and in the long term, I think things will be fine. Travel will pick up again, and prices will go down eventually. To wrap up, I really think that Airbnb may be, in the long run, the biggest winner of this new sharing economy revolution we've experienced over the last 10 years. You think of companies like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Turo. All these companies are basically what we now call the sharing economy, where you can drive for Uber, you can drive for Lyft, you can drive for DoorDash, you can rent out your car, similar to Airbnb, except for cars, but that's not publicly traded at this point. But to me, all those companies have one big looming threat hanging over them, and that is full self-driving. Now, in the next 10 years, and maybe 10 years sounds like a long time to you, but if I'm buying a company and I see a massive threat to the entire business model within 10 years, for me, that's a non-starter. So we have these two companies that are basically just going to hope whoever solves full self-driving will license it to them and allow them to have cars on their platform, where all these drivers will not have the hardware on their cars capable of performing full self-driving. So why should the person who solves the incredibly, incredibly hard problem of full self-driving even want to give these providers a cut when they've done all the hard work already? They could just set up their own network. Sorry, guys, I think I've gone off on a bit of a tangent here. But anyway, point being, I think Airbnb is the big winner of the new sharing economy. They have a massive total addressable market. They don't have the looming threat of some new technology that could potentially upend their entire business model and drive them out of business. The CEO and management team are saying all the things I like to hear, and I'm very confident in them. I think the market's going to grow. Having said all this, we haven't gone into the numbers as of yet. This was just the high-level analysis of, is the company a company I want to own? The answer to that is a firm yes. That doesn't necessarily mean right now is the time to buy it. We have to look at valuation. It's always an important factor. See how much it's selling for, and we're going to go over that information in a later video. But I do think that Airbnb is one you need to keep your eye on, and if the time is right, consider adding it to your portfolio. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please do consider hitting like and subscribe. It makes a big difference to me and being able to continue to do this. And I hope to engage with you guys in the comments, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Thanks.